Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome back to my podcast if you're listening to this episode in the audio version only. My name is Rux, I'm a Western tropical astrologer, and today we are going to be talking about the full moon in Aquarius, coming up on the 12th of August at 19 degrees, 21 minutes of Aquarius. But before we start talking full moon astrology, let me take a step back and share a few important things with you. I'm a Western tropical astrologer, therefore all videos on my channel, all episodes on my podcast, they will follow Western tropical astrology. In my practice, I use the whole sign house system. In the whole sign house system, the sign of the ascendant will cover your entire first house. For instance, if you are a Cancer rising, then Cancer will cover your entire first house. Leo will cover your entire second house of income, self-worth, self-esteem, values. Virgo will have rulership over your third house of communication, and so on. Why do I use the whole sign house system? Because it is the oldest out there. It was actually used exclusively for the first 1,000 years of what we now call Western tropical astrology, and also because I have found it to be the most accurate in my experience and in my clients' experience. However, just keep in mind that house systems in astrology are like languages. So if you connect better with a different house system, such as Placidus, equal houses, then by all means, please feel free to go ahead and use that. If you want to work with me, if you want to book a personal consultation, you can find me on my website, which is writteninthestars-astrology.com. That is writteninthestars-astrology.com. You can go to the services section, and in the services section, you will find the 1-hour live Zoom consultation option. This service is perfect for you if you have not had a natal chart analysis done before by an astrologer. Also, it's perfect for you if you do have a great understanding of your natal chart. However, you are looking to see how the future is likely to unfold. You are looking to maybe make the most of the current life chapter that you are in. Also, come to terms with some of the lessons or the challenges that the current life circumstances are kind of like bringing to your doorstep. So you can opt for this service, both if you're looking for a natal chart interpretation, as well as if you're looking for a year ahead forecast. The 1-hour live Zoom consultation is also a great option if you have compatibility questions, if you're interested in your synastry with someone, if you're interested in learning more about your astrocartography, so how your natal chart, how specific parts of your natal chart get emphasized depending upon where you travel to or where you live. And in general, also keep in mind that the 1-hour live Zoom consultation can be customized to fit your needs. So if you have some questions about love, some questions about the year ahead, some questions about your astrocartography, we can absolutely address them during this type of session. Remember that if you are an existing client, so if we have worked together in the past, you can also take advantage of the follow-up consultation option, which is also available on my website. It is a 30-minute follow-up session in which we can discuss about additional topics of interest. We can dive into maybe the months ahead, or kind of like get a glimpse of the year ahead, broad strokes of what the year ahead is likely to look like for you. So just keep that at the top of your mind. Also, folks, please keep in mind that astrology does not predict exact material manifestation. Astrology is only archetypally predictive. It is a tool for self-knowledge, for self-awareness, and a tool that is meant to help us understand what major life chapter we are in. It's meant to help us better understand the timeline of our life, However, astrology is not clairvoyance, and it also does not take away our free will. Actually, astrology does not predict free will. You are the master of your fate, I would say so. And generally, I'm a big believer in the fact that character is destiny. So if you want to change your fate, if you want to maybe take your life in a new direction, I'd say that it is very important to really come to terms with who you are and also make conscious decisions to change and to maybe act differently, to make different choices in your life. Another very important thing to keep in mind is the following. This is a general horoscope. I've had some people reach out at times and say, oh no, this did not actually happen in my life in this way. Folks, a general reading is a general reading. If you want to get an in-depth, accurate, a reading, or let's say a description of what's going on in your life that you resonate with, that's when you go to an astrologer and you get a personal consultation. So if you want to better understand what's happening in your life right now, what's coming up in the future, what are the challenges, lessons, opportunities, my big piece of advice is get a personal consultation. And do not expect general horoscopes to apply to everyone, because that's what they are. They are general. In a personal consultation, we look at the entire natal chart. We look at your angles. We look at the degrees of your planets. We look at exactly what transits, exactly what celestial events trigger your natal chart. We also use other forecasting techniques, because transits are just one forecasting technique that actually needs to be supported by other forecasting techniques, such as perfections, annual perfections, secondary progressions, solar arc directions, and so on. So also remember that. Now, I know this has been a very long intro, but I did want to clarify a few things. And hopefully this answers maybe some of the questions that folks had. Full moon in Aquarius on the 12th of August, 2022. So as I said, this is happening at 19 degrees 21 minutes of Aquarius. If you have personal planets in your natal chart or angles around 19 degrees of fixed signs, the fixed signs are Aquarius, Leo, and Taurus, Scorpio. You're going to feel this the most. You're going to feel this celestial event the most. If you don't have personal planets close to these these degrees, or angles close to these degrees, then of course the full moon is still going to happen in the sky and it will still be reflected somewhere in your life, but it may feel a lot less impactful. It may feel a lot less personal. It may feel like it is not necessarily something that is directly connected with you and your life and what's happening in your immediate, let's say, set of circumstances that you're paying a lot of attention to. 19 degrees, 21 minutes of fixed signs. So essentially, if you've got planets around 18 to 20 degrees of fixed signs, do pay attention to this the most. The full moon is happening at 1:35 a.m. GMT time. It is in conjunction with Saturn. Essentially, this full moon is going to activate very strong Saturn in Aquarius themes for the collective. The new moon in Aquarius at the beginning of the year on the 1st of February, guess what? It was also conjunct Saturn. Lunations, new moons and full moons, but especially full moons, put the spotlight on something. They bring that topic to our conscious attention. They make something visible. It's in our face. We can't pretend that it's not there. We can't pretend that we can't see it. Full moons obviously also bring things to a close. They bring things to a culminating point. We reach a peak at a full moon, and then things kind of like start to die down, metaphorically speaking, to scale back, let's say, So my first recommendation would be to look back at what was happening in your life around the 1st of February, maybe a week before, a week after, because this is likely to come to a culminating moment and even to a close around the 12th of August, especially 3 days before and 3 days after. It is a very tense full moon. I'll put it out there, no matter how we try to sugarcoat this, and we're not, because astrology reflects life, and sometimes life is not all sunshine and rainbows. As much as we might try to sugarcoat this, it is a tense full moon. It is a full moon that makes us feel restricted in some ways. It is a full moon that makes us feel like potentially we've got a lot more work to do. It can be a full moon that says, this is coming to a close. It's not exactly what you thought it would be. It's not exactly playing out in the manner that you thought it would play out. You might need to rebuild further down the line what this full moon is bringing to a close. This full moon could also make us feel like we haven't been able to rise up to certain standards or expectations. So it can feel like a bit of a downer in some ways. It can feel like this is not what we wanted. However, every full moon is an opportunity for us to recognize what we need to release in our life, what is no longer working for us, what we need to do maybe differently. And also to recognize that sometimes things come to a close in whatever format they happen to. And no matter how much harder we try to push, or no matter how much harder we try to apply ourselves to give birth to a different result, sometimes we just have to accept what is, I'd say. This full moon is likely at a collective level to place a spotlight, as I said, on Saturn and Aquarius themes. So something that has to do with maybe restrictions of a collective nature, almost, I'd say, unexpectedly so in a way, because this full moon is actually forming a T-square in the sky between, obviously, the moon conjunct Saturn, the sun in Leo, and Uranus in Taurus. The collective might feel restricted in terms of accessing certain goods. The collective might feel restricted in terms of being able to accumulate as much as they'd like to accumulate. As at a collective level, it may feel like our security is somehow, I wouldn't necessarily say threatened, but our security isn't what it used to be. Maybe parts of our life that we relied upon, existing structures that we relied upon, all of a sudden they're catapulted into a lot less than they initially meant for us, a lot less than they initially represented for us. There may be a sense of women being restricted in some shape or form. There could be protests connected with women's issues or social or societal topics that impact mothers, women in general, I would say. There may also be a sense of existing institutions that maybe the collective relied upon going through a sudden upheaval, a sudden radical shakeup, an unexpected shakeup. What's also happening in the sky at the time of this full moon, so something that we may be able to rely upon, is the following. Mars in Taurus Neptune in Pisces and Pluto in Capricorn. So we've got two transpersonal planets, Neptune and Pluto. They're forming a minor grand trine here. Yes, there is frustration linked with our principles. Yes, there is frustration linked with the groups that we feel like we belong to, maybe the part of society that we feel like we belong to. Yes, there may be this sense of existing institutions, structures in our life being turned upside down. But on the other hand, Mars in Taurus in a harmonious aspect to Neptune in Pisces and to Pluto in Capricorn says that sometimes slow and steady action without being in a rush, without trying to do too much too fast, it is actually likely to result in building or rebuilding something long term. I would ask myself in this situation, regardless of what you're going through, I would ask myself, how can I slowly but surely move towards a new system in my life, in this particular area that has been disrupted? Also, what sort of hidden power can I access? What sort of hidden resources can I access? And what sort of ideal can I rely upon in these times when it feels like some of my principles have been thrown out the window maybe, or dismantled even? Some fair questions, I suppose, at the time of this full moon in Aquarius. Obviously, it's going to feel at a collective level like we're dealing with two opposing extremes. On the one hand, we've got the people, the masses, Aquarius. We've got the common folk. I mean, basically, pretty much everyone. And on the other hand, we've got the elite, we've got the leaders, we've got the rulers, we've got the few, the special ones. And we've got a challenge, probably of a financial nature, probably something that has to do with food and economy and so on, that affects both. It may feel like leaders, the elites, the few, are trying to impose restrictions upon the many so that we deal with this disruptive problem of a financial, economic, food-related nature. It may feel like the few are trying to get the many to do less, to want less, to need less. How is that going to turn out? I suppose we'll have to wait and see. On that note, let's dive into the update for the 12 zodiac signs. Many times what happens at an individual level, it may feel like it's a lot less painful, stressful, sad. It may feel like it's a lot less negatively impactful compared to what happens at a collective level. The person, the individual, can actually have a much higher vibration than the collective, and that's generally the case. Before we dive into the updates for the 12 zodiac signs, my big recommendation, of course, is to listen to the update for your rising sign. If you don't know your rising sign, then please ask your mom or dig out your birth certificate for your time of birth and go online, seek on maybe Google online natal chart generator and put in your birthday details, and in that way you can find out your rising sign or your ascendant, which is basically the exact degree of your rising sign. And this is the forecast that is likely to resonate a lot more with you. Obviously, if you don't know your rising sign, then listen to the update for your sun sign. My lovely Aries suns and Aries risings. 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after. You're experiencing a full moon in Aquarius in your 11th house of long-term goals, plans, dreams, friends, your tribe. Something is culminating or coming to a close. Something is taking a definitive shape. when it comes to potentially some sort of group type of project, I would recommend looking back at your life, Aries, and asking yourself, what were you working on together with a group of people around the 1st of February, a few days before, a few days after? Because that's when you had a new moon in this part of your chart. Saturn is the ruler of your 10th house of career, so that's why I'm thinking that this full moon is bringing to a close a professional matter. You might decide to actually get out of a group type of project that you were heavily involved in. You might decide to leave behind a professional organization, maybe because you recognize that it is no longer aligned with your values, maybe because you realize that it is no longer a lucrative organization to be a part of. It may also feel like you are dealing with some sort of massive, significant, potentially unexpected expense connected with a group type of event, a group type of activity, a group type of project, but also potentially connected with the life of your children if you do have children. If you don't have children, then obviously you can completely ignore this. This part. A creative project could be coming to an end, but you don't necessarily seem to be very satisfied with the way things have turned out. You could also decide to, as painful as it might be, to end the friendship around this time, my dear Aries. And especially if you're an Aries rising, this year until next year, in July of next year, the transiting North Node is moving through our 2nd house of values. Your value system is evolving and changing, and as that is happening, you might realize that some of the people that were close to you, including friends, they're no longer aligned with you in terms of what matters to you and what matters to them, where you want to put your time, energy, resources, and so on. We do have a minor grand trine in the sky at the time, between Mars and Taurus in your 2nd house of income, Pluto and Capricorn in your 10th house of career, and Neptune and Pisces in your 12th house. Okay, so really kind of like releasing something that represented an important goal for you career-wise may prove to be the best decision that you can make for your career moving forward, and also for your bank account. So don't be afraid if that is happening, Aries. Now, if you are a Taurus sun or a Taurus rising, my dear Taurus, 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, you've got a full moon taking place in Aquarius in your 10th house of career. It's a tense full moon. I recommend first and foremost looking back at what was happening in your career sector around the 1st of February, whether you initiated something, whether you took some sort of decision to work towards something, to build something long-term. You do have Saturn in your 10th house of career until March of next year. It may feel like there's a lot of responsibilities on your shoulders. It may feel like the burden that you are carrying at work in a professional space is quite heavy. If the burden that you're carrying is linked with what you're looking to achieve in the long run professionally, then I'm just going to say it. It may feel like this full moon brings a bit of an obstacle in your path, but it is not insurmountable. It might be something that you're disappointed with. It might be something that you didn't expect because this full moon is in a tense aspect to Uranus in your 1st house. However, if you're not 100% sure that what you're building professionally is something that you want to commit to in the long run, the 12th of August might be what happens also before and after, a few days before and a few days after. It could be what's it called? What breaks the camel's back? The straw that breaks the camel's back, I think is the saying. You are likely to feel restricted and kind of like tied, constrained in terms of the choices that you have professionally. Remember that sometimes we impose chains upon ourselves. Saturn, for you, my dear Taurus, is also the ruler of your ninth house of belief systems. Is it possible that it is your beliefs, limiting beliefs, connected with what you thought your career should look like? Is it possible that these are holding you back from breaking free from a situation that is no longer fulfilling? Ask yourself that. This could also be a time when, especially for the mother figure, something is kind of like coming to a close. Something is coming to an end. It could be something that might make you feel a little bit stressed or a little bit, how should I say, cautious as to what the future holds for her. On the other hand, remember that we're only responsible for ourselves at the end of the day, my dear Taurus. You do have the stamina to push forward in your life, whatever is happening, whatever you're letting go of. You do have the grit. You do have the vitality to move forward with new goals and new plans. Whatever needs to be released professionally is maybe something that you need to really consider as to whether you've held on to it for way too long. Now, if you are a Gemini sun or a Gemini rising, my lovely Geminis, on the 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, you're experiencing a full moon in Aquarius in your ninth house of higher education, long distance traveling, foreign lands, foreign countries, foreign affairs. I dare say that you Geminis, along with Libras, because you're air signs just like Aquarius, even though this is definitely a tense and stressful lunation, you may actually take it a lot more in your stride. You may see the glass half full a lot easier than other signs. Just putting that out there. So this full moon reflects back at themes that you are dealing with around the 1st of February, a few days before, a few days after, especially when it comes to your education, the academic environment, classes, courses, mentors, also anything of a legal nature, so maybe applying for residency, visas, passports, and so on. You may receive some exam results around this time. You may also complete a cycle of learning and education. Because this full moon is in a tense aspect to Uranus in your 12th house, there is likely to be some sort of unexpected event or maybe unforeseen part of this stage of completion that makes you feel like, oh man, I've still got some more work to do, or this is not exactly what I expected, or this makes me realize how much more I still have to learn. And that's okay. If you are traveling around this time, I strongly recommend, well, leaving as soon as possible, as early as you can possibly can from home, maybe allowing for a lot of time to make it to the airport, kind of like taking into account potential unforeseen events that could delay your travels. You might still experience delays. I'll just put it out there. I'll just put it out there. Essentially, if you are traveling, it may feel like a bit of a frustrating affair. It may feel like a delayed situation. And it may also feel like you need to deal with a lot of duties and responsibilities, I'd say. If you're traveling for work, then let's put it out there. It might actually feel like, indeed, a productive trip, but there's still likely to be these potentially unforeseen events that make you feel like, oh man, I should have checked this in advance, or I should have prepared more. The key takeaway out of this full moon is, yes, next time you are probably going to prepare more and better, because there probably will be a next time. I like the minor grand trine in the sky between Mars in your 12th house, Pluto in your 8th house, and transiting Neptune in your 10th house of career. If you do need some sort of maybe help or support from an institution or from a boss or from a manager or even from a parent in regards to what's happening for you education-wise, travel-wise, or in terms of a legal matter, I would ask for it. I would definitely ask for it. Especially since Mars for you, let's see, it rules your 11th house of friends and your 6th house of work. So whatever you're dealing with that is annoying you, ask for help from a parent or from a coworker or even from a friend. Or it is possible that whatever a parent or a friend does for work may get you out of this pickle. Let's put it this way. If you're a Cancer sun or a Cancer rising like yours truly here, this full moon on the 12th of August, Cancerians, 3 days before, 3 days after, is happening in your 8th house of other people's money, shared assets, shared resources, psychological transformation, death and rebirth, and, well, intimacy also. You are likely to make a significant payment around this time. If you personally aren't making a significant payment, then it could be your partner, especially if you are in a relationship. It could be a business partnership, but it could also be a personal partnership. This may feel like a time when your partner is somehow restricted in terms of how much money they can access. There could be a sense of delay or frustration connected with your partner's resources. Maybe they were expected to get paid for a project earlier, and they're not, and that's annoying, and that may also interfere a little bit with some of the plans that you had made for the future. You might also need, together with a partner, you might need to rethink some of the plans for the future that you had made, just because the finances are not exactly, the financial aspect of where both of you are, they're not exactly where you thought they would be. Saying that, there's a minor grand trine in the sky between Mars in your 11th house of long-term plans, Pluto in your 7th house of relationships, and Neptune in Pisces in the 9th house. I'd say that if you kind of like learn that some things are best not forced, but kind of like taken slowly, methodically, it doesn't mean that they won't happen at all. It just means that they could be delayed sometimes. And many times delays actually act in our favor without us realizing that they do. So kind of like look at the big picture and say, okay, what am I not seeing? What are the kind of like positive side effects of this kind of like frustrating maybe event connected with finances? You might also need to clear some debt around the 12th of August, Cancer. If you're a Leo sun or a Leo rising, 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, a full moon is taking place in your 7th house of relationships, in a tense aspect to Uranus and Taurus in your 10th house. Okay, so this could be a time when you actually say goodbye to an existing business partnership. It could also be a time when you recognize that something needs to change drastically in terms of how you maybe present a partner to the outside world. If you choose not to change your approach to how you present your partner to the outside world, then the partnership might actually fall apart. A partner in your life, business or romantic, could have a sudden, unexpected, disruptive event happening within their own family. Because the 10th house is the 4th house from your 7th house of relationships. So if we use derivative houses, then it's kind of like it's putting the spotlight very much on the partner's family, on the partner's home, parents, and so on. This could also be a time when you make a surprise announcement to the outside world connected with your relationship sector. Surprise means whatever it means for you, for someone else. You do seem to be stressed as to how you're going to be perceived because it may feel like you're going to be judged by the outside world for the surprise announcement that you're making. However, no one knows your life circumstances better than you do. Also have a think about what kicked off in the area of relationships around the 1st of February, a few days before, a few days after, because that might be coming to a completion around this time, my dear Leos. Also, let's see, Mars for you rules your 9th house and your 4th house. A few things here. There might be some changes, some alterations that you need to make to your living situation as a result of what's happening in your partnership sector. They might prove to be very fulfilling and satisfying, even though they kind of like come as a side effect of something that was sudden, unexpected, and it does seem to bring something to a close or to an end. My dear Virgos, Virgo suns and Virgo risings. 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, the full moon in Aquarius is activating your 6th house of health and day-to-day work, and also your 12th house of what's been going on behind the scenes and mental health. It is forming a T-square, the full moon, with Uranus and Taurus in your 9th house. Okay, Virgos, this is a time when you seem to be dealing potentially with a crisis at work, or from a health-related perspective, you realize that something needs to change. So it could feel like a moment of acutization of a health-related nature. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to manifest in a physical way. It could also be like you really feeling the mental pressure of having to deal with something health-wise that maybe you've postponed for a long time. So it's like, okay, I gotta do the work. I gotta remove like unnecessary elements from my day-to-day routine because they're negatively impacting my health. I gotta do some work to change my beliefs and my general philosophy when it comes to my health, but potentially also when it comes to your work. This could also be a time when you are taken by surprise by an announcement at work. So it could be that a coworker leaves very suddenly. You might decide that you are going to leave your current job. There could be some sudden announcements that make you realize that this is not the job for you anymore. Just because also from a belief system perspective, you don't resonate with what's happening within a work environment. Sometimes cutting our losses and recognizing that we can't carry on in this manner is the best decision that you can make. My recommendation would be to not allow what's happening in the work environment that is so frustrating, not allow it to negatively impact your health, and only then decide, okay, I'd better quit, or I'd better, I don't know, take some time off. That would be my recommendation. If you're a Libra sun or a Libra rising, my dear Libras, 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, you're experiencing a full moon in Aquarius in your 5th house of romantic love, of creativity, of children, of passions and hobbies. This full moon is reflecting back themes that came to your attention around the 1st of February. So think about what was going on in your life around the 1st of February when it came to children, when it came to romance, when it came to your passions and hobbies. Did you commit to maybe dedicating more time to one of your passions and hobbies? Did you start work on a creative project? Did you commit yourself to finding what truly lights up your fire? Because if you did do that, then this full moon could actually feel like an aha moment. It might also make you feel like in order to tap into your creative potential fully, and also in order to really enjoy life, you first need to address some psychological issues that you may have inherited from your family side. And that could be linked with your past, because Saturn is involved in this lunation. Saturn is the ruler of your 4th house of home. Uranus in the 8th house of legacy and inheritances is involved as well. This could also be a time, if you have kids, when you need to pay for something very significant for your children, and you might even feel like it's actually setting you back a little bit in terms of your goals. This could also be a time when you realize that if you don't want to have fights with a partner, you need to curb your expenses connected with fun, enjoyment, entertainment, and so on. If you do have kids, once again, Libras, there could be a sense of a child dealing with some sort of what to you may feel like a surprise, some sort of like mental health issue that I would really recommend that you kind of like dig into. That's my big recommendation. You do seem to be able to take action, and you also seem to have maybe a consultant or a partner next to you that helps you deal with this situation. And what I would really kind of like advise at this point in time, if your child is dealing with something of this nature, is really taking the kindness and the compassion route, because that is probably going to work best. Scorpios, Scorpio suns and Scorpio risings. The full moon in Aquarius on the 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, is happening in your 4th house of home. You may be leaving a house around this time. You may be moving. You may be relocating. The full moon is conjunct Saturn, which is also the ruler of your 3rd house and of your 4th house. So there could be some, I want to say, some pessimistic news that make their way to you connected with a parent. Why pessimistic? Because it feels like maybe, just maybe, you need to step in and kind of like solve a situation that is very disruptive connected with the life of a parent. It may feel like this could add a bit of a burden to your already heavy weight when it comes to family matters. Women in the family might be suffering in some shape or form, or they may feel sad, depressed, restricted in their choices. It could also be women on the partner's side of the family. So maybe like a mother-in-law that is dealing with something very sudden, very unexpected. It's almost like something is lacking in her life and it's taking you both by surprise, and you're like, okay, we need to solve this, we need to help her, we need to be kind of like the bigger person here, I'd say. Do not hesitate to ask your partner for help, whatever is happening here. Mars is in your 7th house, forming a minor grand trine with Pluto in the 3rd house of communication and Neptune in the 5th house of children and enjoyment and romance. So having some honest, open conversations with your partners about what you love and about what you need, and maybe also about some of the things that you've kept hidden. It's almost like this makes the situation a lot more bearable, I'd say, Scorpios. If you're a Sagittarius sun or a Sagittarius rising, 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, you've got a full moon in your 3rd house, activating your 3rd house, 9th house axis. Sagittarians, some of you might need to let go of a car. You might need to sell a car. You might need to kind of like push it to the side and say, okay, this is no longer working. We've tried, but we are better off just buying a new one. There could be car disruption. There could be short distance travel disruption that you experience at the time. There could also be some sort of sudden unexpected news coming your way that really shakes you up mentally. Coming from a sibling. I don't know, maybe a sibling announces that they're all of a sudden moving to a different country, and you're like, what? Where's this coming from? Why are you doing this? There could also be some sudden news connected with a sibling's job. This can be a time when you also wrap up some sort of class or course, but it almost feels like you are not 100% confident or appreciative of yourself in terms of how you can use your knowledge in a work environment, I would say. You are likely to have a bit of a face-off at work around this time, probably with someone maybe of a different cultural background. It is useful sometimes to remember that in order to get the job done, in order to just kind of like reach your goal, doing things by yourself is the best way to get it done. As much as you'd like collaboration, because collaboration seems to be very strained at work around this time, Sagittarius. You may also hear news of an exam that you need to retake, and also potentially of the fact that maybe something that you've spent a lot of time studying will no longer be applied in a work environment, and you're like, what? Why did I learn all of this? Now, if you are a Capricorn sun or a Capricorn rising, 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, you're experiencing a full moon in your 2nd house of finances. So the spotlight will very much be on your money. What was happening with your money, Capricorns, around the 1st of February? Maybe also 3 days before, 3 days after, because that seems to be coming to a close. That seems to be coming to an end. My big recommendation for this full moon is to recognize what expenses need to go out of your life. You might be feeling like you don't have enough money. You might be feeling pessimistic and down and maybe even disappointed about where your bank account is at this moment in time. The full moon is conjunct Saturn. Saturn wants us to remove the fluff, wants us to remove whatever is unnecessary. So I don't know, look at any, let's say, subscriptions that you're no longer using. I would restructure or rethink my budget. It is really a time to sit down and to ask yourself, do I need to spend money on all of these nice to haves? The full moon is in a tense aspect to Uranus in the 5th house, which is the house of enjoyment and pleasure. So maybe some pleasures that you've got are actually costing you a lot more and setting you back a lot more than you thought they are, Capricorns. You might be paid for something around this time, but it feels like it's less than you thought you would get. You might also need to pay for something that I want to say makes you angry or frustrated or both, just because it doesn't seem to be an expense that you actually want to pay for, or it doesn't seem to be an expense that you created for yourself. It's like, no, this is connected with like partners or maybe children, and it's like, why do I have to be out of pocket to pay for this person's thing? Mars in the 5th house, Pluto and Capricorn in your 1st house, and Neptune and Pisces in the 3rd house are saying, they're forming a minor grand trine, and they're saying, get it done, get it over with, you're dissatisfied, we get it, you may feel annoyed with yourself, you may feel disappointed with yourself because you're in this situation. You can move forward if you just get it out of the way. My lovely Aquarius suns and Aquarius risings. The full moon on the 12th of August is happening in your 1st house of identity. You are having an aha moment as to what part of your self-image, what part of the way in which you defined yourself needs to go. It could be a tense time from a mental health perspective, Aquarius. You may feel like you're facing a blind spot. You may feel like you're facing a shadow. You may feel overwhelmed and overburdened with responsibilities, with a long to-do list. You may feel physically strained. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you were exhausted around this time, especially Aquarius risings. This is a time to recognize that you can't do it all, and you can't do it all yourself. This full moon is activating your 7th house of relationships as well. You can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders and expect not to crack. So you could be cracking a little bit, especially from a mental health perspective around this time. It is a wake-up call. It's also a wake-up call to rest more. It's also a wake-up call to take better care of your body. It is also a wake-up call to realize and to recognize that dedicating time, energy, effort, resources, and attention to your body, to building yourself up, building your own self-defenses, taking care of your issues, that is not selfish. That is a must, I'd say. You may also feel like you are at a crossroads in terms of your relationships, Aquarius. There could be a big disruption happening in your home and family life. It could be something that really puts a strain on your partnership, on business partnerships, on romantic relationships. In a sense, at this point in time, letting go of what you thought was solely your responsibility to carry might prove to be the best tactic, Aquarius. I'm just putting it out there. And maybe even booking some time off for yourself. If you are suffering of anything health related, it's probably exhaustion. And last but not least, Pisces, my dear Pisces risings, Pisces suns as well, if you don't know your rising sign. 12th of August, 3 days before, 3 days after, is a full moon in your 12th house of the shadow, of mental health, of what's been kind of like lurking maybe in your subconscious. The 12th house is also connected with isolation, surrender, restrictions. This full moon, Pisces, is really asking you to think about what you need to take very seriously in terms of your mental health, what you need to actually act upon, build upon, restructure, commit to in terms of your mental health, because you are likely to feel stressed. You are likely to feel overwhelmed maybe, and it is probably more so than something that's happening in the external reality. It is probably more of a mental health issue. I would recommend around this time also recognizing what sort of pre-existing goals you need to let go of, because some of them are just not aligned with where you're headed. Some of them are just no longer who you are turning into. It could be a good few days in which you feel isolated from the world, Pisces, in which you feel alone, in which you feel like you need to do a lot of introspection. And introspection also in terms of thought patterns and ways of communicating with the outside world that need to go. They need to get out of your life. Some Pisces might also quit their job around this time, or find out that they're no longer going to be working in the same environment that they've been working up until this point. That may not necessarily be a bad thing. Even though it may feel sad, even though it may feel like, oh no, but I invested so much time and effort into this. Even though you might have a tendency to look at the glass half empty at this point in time, there's a minor grand trine in the sky between Mars in your third house, Pluto in your 11th house, and Neptune and Pisces in your first house. It is a good time to recognize that you don't know exactly where your life is taking you, and that's okay, because you are going to find your way slowly but surely. And new goals and new objectives will kind of like pop up in your mind and in your soul and in your heart, and they're going to be much more fulfilling than the old ones. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Don't forget, if you want to work with me, you can find me on my website, writteninthestars-astrology.com. Currently I'm taking bookings for the month of September for live Zoom consultations. And if you're not following me on Instagram, I would also recommend that you do so, because I do more regular, even daily updates, or every other day, as to what's happening in the sky. My Instagram handle is @RuxUnbelievable, in one word, RuxUnbelievable. Take it easy, be gentle with yourselves, and also cut whatever losses need to be cut in your life. Thank you. Bye.